Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. All right, I know it's like super late at night, but I can't help myself. If you guys end up missing Bible AD, it was mainly because I could not actually broadcast it from my church on YouTube Live because the reception was just totally terrible down there. And so what I decided to do was, and it was definitely a decent turnout, especially for a first session. So what I decided to do was, in case if you guys have missed it, I'm gonna go ahead and actually give part one of the lesson here tonight. And so I just want to let you know that it's going to be going on for, just every other week. There's going to be a total of four lessons that are very powerful. Put a lot of painstaking research into, and definitely had a lot of fun too, always definitely end up learning a lot more about, just the roots of a lot of our doctrines and, even, some heretical and heterodox doctrines. One thing about research is that research pretty much puts you on this never-ending study, which is the reason why I love, doing what I do. I think, to learn the study is just as fun as it is teaching. It's very life-giving, especially when you have people who are hungry to learn. There's something that they're trying to figure out. There's some kind of, some kind of truth that they're after, whatever it is. And, as a teacher, it really, definitely feels good to go ahead and help that person, along with their path, So with that being said, just give me a minute here. I want to go ahead and give out the link here to, some people who want to end up watching. I'm not going to allow anyone in this time. I'm just going to go ahead and pretty much put it up for people to watch. So just give me a few more seconds here. Forgive me if my internet seems to be going a little low, even though I bought some Wi-Fi. Don't understand why that's giving me a bit of a difficulty, but I just get a few hiccups trying to get through things here. Just give me 1 second. Okay, it seems like that's doing what it's doing. Just give me 1 more second here. Just got to get one more thing straightened up. And so, yeah, while I'm trying to get this straightened up, once again, our next time that we'll be actually meeting together is, I believe it is the 23rd. What does it say? It says, nope, it is the 21st. So we'll be meeting on March 21st the next time. Obviously, the first time was tonight, which went really great. Just give me a second. Alan Thomas, hey, how's it going? All right. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and just get started here. Just give me a minute. All right. Bible AD. Bible AD, like I said, it's going to basically deal with the differences between specifically one West Black Hebrew Israelite doctrine and the Bible, Christianity. Now, of course, I am going to be delving into, other sects and things, but my main focus will be, one West, or at least some moderate Israelites. So this is going to be session 1, and session 1 is just a introduction. If you guys do want this PowerPoint presentation, simply email me. Maybe I'll give you parts of it. The reason why I say parts is because, once again, this is a very special presentation. And, I definitely do still want to teach it around, So we're going to be going through 4 areas today. Today we're going to cover 4 things. One, we're going to talk about our world today. At least my interpretation of it based on my experience and studies and everything. Then after that, we're going to go right into youth and the information age. We're going to show how the whole chessboard has pretty much changed, and we cannot use the same strategies as yesteryear and basically how we grew up. Let me see. Also, sorry about that. Also, we're going to go through Hebrew beginnings, and it's going to be a short version of, how the Hebrew movement went through the African Americans. Now, I decided to give the longer version to how it all began and what we can do. The reason why I gave the longer version to more of the European and the other kind of area is because of the doctrine. I'm trying to specifically trace doctrine. From there, any movement can pick up a doctrine. So that is the reason why I did it the way that I did it. Hopefully that makes sense. Hold on, mic check. By the way, if you guys can't see anything or if you guys can't hear anything, definitely let me know in the chat. So, in our world today, this is the image that pretty much kind of pops in my head when I think of Christian denominations, okay? Obviously, everyone has a unique piece or bit of power, and obviously it's very different. And so it's very diverse. And, of course, if I was an atheist looking from the outside in on Christian denominations and in-house dialogues and talks between different beliefs with, different other kind of Christian denominations and sects, this is what would pretty much come to my mind. You have these different people with these different abilities, all ranging from different backgrounds, even species, right? Cross species, all kinds. And yet they all have something in common. And that is, in some sense, they're all heroes. Now, I'm not sure if there's any villains in there. It looks like there is. But you pretty much get the idea of what I'm trying to paint or convey when I think about Christian denominations. And so the world that we live in, is, like I said, is very diverse, because of what we have in, just religion in general. And I think that Christianity pretty much, spells that out more vividly than others. And so now I'm going to talk about I'm going to give you guys a perspective. I want you guys to pretty much pretend that it is the year 1890 or 1880 or maybe even 1860. If you ever wanted to kind of know anything, if you ever wanted to find out some deeper insights into life, into, what the future holds for you, let's just say you're 10 and 11 years old, you would basically go to your parents. Your parents were pretty much doorkeepers of, the insight and knowledge of your life. This is the year 1860. Now, of course, as you get older, you're going to want to know more about not just, what's ahead, but you also want to know about the past. And so you would go to your grandparents. That's another set of people that you would go to. They would give you wisdom about who you are, why you have the little quirks that you have, everything like that. And also some things they learn from their parents. You have a grander idea of yourself and also just, life in general. As you get older, you probably contemplate even some deeper and complex things, so you would actually go to your priest or your pastor. Maybe you would talk to them about things. Either way, these three are the gatekeepers of wisdom and insight for your life. 1860, right? But as you kind of go on, let's just say that 100 years goes by, and now we are in 1960. So now we're in 1960. You have libraries now. People are basically going to college a lot more. It's a lot more prestigious. People are starting to understand other parts of the world because technology is starting to connect us in ways that the old world was not connected. Starting to connect us a lot faster. And so now, as people, in this age, they really don't go to their grandparents that much. Maybe they go to their parents for some general things. And of course, the priest, well, he's still the priest. The pastor, you're always still going to go to them for some type of counsel or advice. And so the difference is you start to see a bit more of an independence now, right? And now people are starting to get their knowledge more on an independent basis. Now, nevertheless, if you were like me when growing up and when I was born in 1984, of course I still had books that my mom would give me, but at the same time, if I didn't understand a certain word, I would go to my mom. Not anymore in terms of, today, in our age today. What do I mean by that? Today, these are your three gatekeepers of knowledge, of wisdom, of insight, of guidance for life, whatever it is. These are your three gatekeepers today. The year is 2018. Let me make it even more clear. Facebook is your peers. Google is your parents. And YouTube is your priest. Think about it. We're in 2018. We are no longer in 1860. We're not even in 1960. If you want to know anything, if you want someone or something to tell you a good story, to actually give you a narrative or a demonstration of life or whatever, you're going to turn on the YouTube and it is going to preach you a sermon. If you want to know any kind of general information, you don't ask your parents anymore. You ask Google. And of course, if you want to know what everyone is thinking, you automatically go to your peers. Where can you find a good bit of them? Instantly, at any time, anywhere, on Facebook. This is a world of your 5-year-olds, your 10-year-olds, your 12, 15, 17-year-olds. This is the world that they live in today. Whatever generation that we grew up in, 1984, 1980, 1960, that is not the way that they grew up now. So that means whatever kind of mindset that our children are developing, it is important that we know what that mindset is and how the chessboard is completely changed. I'm pretty much going somewhere with this. I want you guys to pretend that you are inside the shoes of, post-millennial, I don't know what kind of child it would be if they're 12 years old, but let's just say there is a 12-year-old. This is their world. Now, there's an issue. I end up showing this as a part of my behavior improvement courses that I teach in the schools. This is Erik Erikson's 8 stages of theories in life. He was an American psychologist, born in the 1930s. And he said that there was 8 stages that human beings go through in life. If you end up failing to master any one of these stages, even at a basic level, right? You would end up having some kind of, defect or issue in life. Either way, you're going to pay for it later on in life if you don't learn it right at that moment during the time of that those ages of your life. So, for example, the easiest one is from infancy to 1 year old. There is one lesson that you learn coming out of that womb. Who to trust and who not to trust. If you don't learn to trust somebody, you end up like some of the kids that, were around my age group when I was 5 years old in kindergarten. Some of them were shy. They didn't learn how to trust or attach to other people. They always clung on to their mother's legs. They never got to really kind of, get to know other people, and therefore they stayed to themselves. They never learned to trust, to bond, to attach to other people. They never learned a healthy attachment to trust with people. So what happened? They became shy. They played with their own blocks. They played with their own Legos. That was the defect that happened, and somehow that behavior became normalized as the child became older and just thought, well, maybe that's just the way I am. Maybe I'm just, to myself, right? Well, it could be that they did not learn that lesson. Now, what does this have to do with anything that I'm showing you? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because if you take that same child, right, and they are trying to grow in church, right? One of the ways that we definitely do grow in the Lord is definitely not just through worship and clinging to the Lord and prayer and those very important things. But another way that we also grow is by what we learn via, hence, the sermon. But the problem is, if you have this huge, beautiful book called the Bible, and you're not really going over all of it, or at least a good portion of it, then all of a sudden it's going to leave gaps. Gaps leave questions. Kids, as they get older, 12 years old, 15, 18 years old, eventually they're going to start asking questions like, why don't we ever study Ezekiel? What is up with Isaiah? Why are we always in the New Testament? And when we're in the Old Testament, why is it that we're always running up about the same characters? What's up with this? What's up with that? What's up with all these lineage chapters in Chronicles? I don't understand it. All of a sudden, these things that are not accounted for, whatever the curiosity that the 17-year-old, 15, 19-year-old has in your church, and they're not being taught these things, and guess what? That is a gap. And we need to understand what it is that the kids are hungry for, what it is that they want to learn in the Word, and above all, what is the world saying to them about the Bible? Because if the world is saying certain things about the Bible that the pastor or someone else is not touching on, then all of a sudden they naturally begin to grow certain questions. If those questions go unanswered, they're like unpaid bills. That's why unaddressed topics are like the unpaid bills, and hence cults are the unpaid bills of the church. I hope that's a very clear, vivid picture in your mind when you're seeing, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds in your church, and they're trying their best to grow in the Word, but yet they have these questions that are basically bombarded from the words that they actually encounter every day about the Bible. And they look to the pastors. If the pastors don't end up speaking about those things, then guess what? They have other places where they'll get that information. And it's the same place where they're getting all their questions bombarded from, right? Facebook, Google, YouTube. So if you're not addressing these things, it's almost as if you're like saying, just go Google it. In some sense, it's almost like that's what they're doing. Unintentionally, that is. Now, of course, in the early church, you had catechisms. And the Catholic Church, they actually still do these things. In the early church, you just couldn't be like, oh, I want to be part of the church. No, you actually had to sit, you had to learn, right? You couldn't take the Eucharist right away, of course. No, like those things are for people who are saved. There was a way that you actually were taught before you actually ended up joining the church. You were catechized, right? It was the best way for them to make sure that once you're in, not only are you in as a member, but you are in as a spiritually mature and nurtured, informed Christian. Even as brothers and fathers, they practiced this asceticism. So you ended up not just mentally learning, but hey, you did church practices. And so you were deemed, okay, well, this person has done all of these things. They have did these certain exercises or whatever it is they did with us. So therefore, they've shown that they're discipline ready. Why don't we let them in? And you can now become a full member of us. So that's what the early church did. And I think that hey, it did work for the most part. But of course, hey, there's still were a lot of heresies around. But also, a lot of those heresies actually came from honest bishops. That's a whole other story. But I hope that kind of paints a picture about, the past and the present. So when it comes to a child, this is the image that burns in my mind every time I think about a young person or someone that's in a church and they pretty much don't get, what it is that they're looking for in terms of just simple questions, right? I'm not saying that pastors can hit all questions. No, they can't. That's impossible. But I do believe that the world is speaking loud enough where they are asking some basic, consistent, constant things. And I think at a bare minimum, those things need to be addressed. But if not, this is how a young person looks when they're in church and they're receiving things, but there's still just that one thing that they simply, honestly, sincerely want to know. Whatever it is. This is what it looks like. And if they don't get it from us, guess where they're going to get it from? They're going to get it from Facebook, Google, and YouTube. Now, I know what you're thinking. Right now, you think, well, all right, I understand that, but Matt, I don't think it's that bad. I want you to take a look to the screen to the right. This whole theme of you've been lied to. If I could sum it up in one phrase, that's what the world is saying. The reason why you're not getting this answer from your church or whatever it is that you're seeking is because basically you are being lied to every time you step through those doors every Sunday. Here, let us show you what the real answer is and the reason why they don't give it to you. Here, I'll give you an example. Look at what it says in the middle left or in the middle top of the page. It says, "Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and thou shalt set thyself thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, said the Lord." God is talking to the Edomites through the prophet Obadiah. But people will tell you that people that believe this, they'll tell you, well, the Edomites are an actual nation. Well, which nation is that? Well, America. Do you see that symbol over there? It's an eagle, isn't it? So, who's talking about an eagle? Eagle. Obadiah is. Oh, who is Obadiah? Obadiah is a prophet. Oh, he's a prophet, so therefore he's prophesying about an eagle that just happens to be great America. And won't America come down one day under God's judgment? And 45 minutes later, the 19-year-old is perhaps maybe a little convinced, if not more curious about what these people are saying. You see that? That is the world that they face. If people are feeling like that they've been lied to about the white Jesus, well, look in the middle of the page. That is the picture of, Jesus as, a white man, and his head is being pitched on a sword from a black Jesus who looks like a pro wrestler. These are the things that they'll end up finding online. For example, that YouTube video right there. The Israelites, what does it say? It says, the Bible is a puzzle. A righteous teacher can put it together. In other words, I know what the Bible means. I know you think your pastor does, but how about you come listen to me? That's essentially what it's saying. Because I will tell you something different than what your pastor is telling you. And you compare me to your pastor, and then after that, you let the truth lead you, son. You let the truth lead you, daughter. Let the truth lead you. Which one sounds more convincing? Then after that, what happens to the young person next? They go back to their church, and they might not ask their pastor, but they may ask the people in their congregation certain questions. Questions like, how is Jesus the Messiah's real name if there is no letter J in the Greek or Hebrew? What's your nationality? Who is the new covenant for?
Why is this important? Well, what does it say in Jeremiah 31:31? He says he'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Did it say the rest of the world? See, these are the questions that they actually have from people that they listen to. How about this one? How can we say we follow Jesus if he kept the law and we don't? Didn't Jesus keep the law? Who did Christ come for? Well, you would say John 3:16. Well, what if, the 19-year-old in your church ends up bringing you to, let's say, Matthew 10:5-6. Go unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. How about this one? Why do you quote Paul so much if Jesus is who you claim to follow? Well, why do you celebrate man-made holidays? Isn't the doctrine of the Trinity a Roman Catholic doctrine? Don't you know that Constantine changed Christianity? I mean, is not today's Christianity a white man's religion? But yet you're black. A Christian or a Jew? Oh, he was a Jew. So why are you a Christian? You see that? These are the questions that they end up asking people. And if you don't give them answers, then guess who will? All they will. So this is the reason why, at some basic level, it is important for us to pretty much understand what it is, what are the relevant things that are hitting our young people all the time. We may not be able to know everything, but we sure as heck can be watchmen and watchwomen to see what's coming on in our community, in our gates. So I wanted to show you one example. This is a one West Hebrew way of thinking. After a while, it does change or shift your thinking after a while when you begin to adopt these things. For example, you used to say, who is Christ? Now you're preoccupied with saying, well, I know who Christ is, but who is Israel? Now the next one is, who is Satan? Well, I mean, I know who Satan is, but who is Esau? Maybe Esau is the Arabs. Maybe Esau is a white man. Or maybe Esau is Satan. He used to say, well, how do I walk as Christ commanded and taught us, right? Because he will always be about his parables and his teachings. You always want to do what Christ said. No. One West campus, they would say, no. How do I walk as Christ walked in the law? Didn't he keep the law? And plus, doesn't it say that we should walk as he walked? We should halakha as he halakha? As it says in 1 John? How about that? How do I live out my faith? He's always talking about faith, right? No. Now it's, how do we keep the law? Why? Because Jesus kept the law. The Christian says, well, the problem is sin, right? Oops. Come out. Oh, no. I'm going to get muffled. That's not good. Let's see. Hey, can you guys hear me clear? If not, then I think I got an idea. Once again, can you guys hear me clearly? Someone's saying that I can't be heard. Okay, just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna go ahead and take my my microphone out, and I'm gonna use my phone to speak, so that way I'll be heard clearly. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Man, well, I'm wondering how long was I muffled? Dang, I've been going for like nearly almost a half hour. Oh boy. Okay.
Okay. Just give me a second. All right. Test 1, 2. Can I be heard? Just doing a test. All right. Test 1, 2. Can I? Okay. All right. So, can I be heard? Can I be heard? Can somebody let me know? Okay. Good. Well, dag, man. I'm definitely not starting over, so I hope I don't sound like I'm underwater for the last half hour. I mean, dag, like all that cheddar just gone. But anyway, okay. Where was I? Where was I? Where was I? Where we at? Let me see. One more thing. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. I think you guys pretty much get the idea. When it comes to Christians, they said that the problem is sin. It's ultimately sin, but when it comes to one Westers, they often lay a lot of issues for the sloppy, terrible job that Christianity does, and that's the reason why we have all these problems. So they contextualize it into specific issues of the day besides keeping it, the main issue, which is sin. There's nothing wrong with contextualizing issues, but when it's to the point where it clouds out sin, then all of a sudden you start attacking the issue as if it's the sin itself. That's a problem, and it's almost idolatrous. That's the side effect of idolatry when you look at things that way. So all of a sudden you have, we're in the wilderness of this world. That is how the Christians end up looking at the world, because Jesus said we're in the world, but not of the world. He also said that, that he said his kingdom is not of this world. His apostles had said, his disciples said, well, we're citizens of heaven. And so if that is the case, our wilderness is the world. So when you have, that, it goes into, well, we're in captivity. And so if the wilderness is no longer the world and we're just talking about captivity, then that means that just like the Jews were set free from their captivity, that means one day they're going to all go back to where? You guess it, Jerusalem. So now all of a sudden, people are more excited about a physical landmass than they are about the Jerusalem above. Do you see the differences between those two? Where one is actually looking toward what the Bible calls a heavenly hope, and the one says an earthly hope. But meanwhile, when you look, when it says that blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Yes. Which earth? Not this one. No, Jesus is going to make a new heaven and a new earth. And it is that one that we look forward to. When it comes to heaven, when you die, if you were to die, right now, you would either go to one or two places. You would not come back here. So the only time that we're going to be coming back here is during the times of the new heaven and the new earth. That is it. Let me go ahead and continue. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Beatrice. So I decided to go ahead and painstakingly kind of put this little thing together here. And these are 5 core areas that you basically see all of this kind of like Hebrew messianic stuff. You can sum it up into 5 areas. 1, you have British Israelism. 2, you actually have the Hebrew rooters, right? 3, you got Hebrew moderates. 4, you got the One West Black Black Hebrew Israelites, KKK, Christian identity. Now I'm gonna tell you, the British Israelism, it got its kick in the 1590s, or the 1640s. Also, KKK, that started in the 1930s. The Christian identity started in the 1930s. That was a break off from British Israelism. Also, you had the Hebrew roots because of C.H. Dodd and a few other people. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That was in the 1930s, more like 1936, 1933. Of course, the One West Black Hebrew Israelites, that was their own kind of, basically it was a black version of Christian identity.
Okay, test 1 2, test 1 2. I have no clue what happened. I apologize, y'all. I don't know. Technology is just weird and odd and unpredictable. So once again, I truly apologize. Okay, so let's do some testing again. Wait just a minute. All right, just a second. Okay, can everyone see what's on the screen? Once again, can everybody see what's on the screen, and can everyone hear me?
Okay, all right, good, good. All right, so with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. I could actually spend a lot of time on this chart, but I'm not gonna go and do that. I'm just gonna go ahead and continue. But you pretty much get the idea, when you basically look at this chart. I mean, look, for example, the British Israelism, prophesied world domination. Literally, that is what they believe about, you know, their end, right? They're prophesied to rule. And essentially, basically, when you read the doctrine, they believe that they are prophesied to occupy the world as a world power because they can trace their lineage to the line of King David, and they're prophesied to rule like this. This is like that's literally what it is. If you want the sources, I will give them to you. It comes out of these own people's mouths. They have books since 1590. If I can sum it up in one phrase, that's what it is. You have to ask yourself, why is that? What? Oh man. Okay, I sound muffled again. Oh no. Ooh, hold on, hold on. What's going on? Okay, test one, two, test one, two. Once again, do I sound muffled? I need to know. Test one, two. Once again, test one, two. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, like I said, I really don't know what's going on tonight. A lot of technology is just acting weird. I don't understand it, but I'm gonna keep going. Um, you guys can go ahead and pause this and simply just read through it for yourself and see if you find any patterns. So, we're going to go ahead through some Hebrew beginnings. You're probably wondering, how is it that this movement started? How is it that blacks begin to associate themselves with Jews? Well, this is one way of pretty much looking at it. The word, the song, and the shout. What you had back in those days was that we as blacks, we ended up going about religion in a whole different way. I mean, any time that we ended up really getting into something, we put our all into it. We put our soul into it. We put our everything into it. Right? I'm gonna go ahead and read this. This comes from Albert J. Robital, and he says this: the shout would start with a leader calling out a verse of a spiritual, while the shouters responded by walking around in a circle. When the singers stood outside the ring, they took up the chorus. The shout proper would begin with the ring band shuffling rapidly to the beat announced by the hand clapping and foot tapping of the chorus of singers who were said to be basing the shouters. The lyrics drew from the Bible and the Protestant hymn book, and so they were mostly made up of biblical imagery and stories. So all that is going on in the midst of their shouting and their dancing and everything that we do when we get down. Biblical imagery, singing about what's going on. Now, if that right there doesn't somehow fit as a perfect shoe on the story of Moses and the Exodus, I don't know what can. Let's go ahead and see what the common thought for whites of this was, right? When they begin to put two and two together, what do they see? As one white army chaplain has noted, he said, there is no part of the Bible with which they are so familiar as the story of the deliverance of Israel. Moses is their ideal of all that is high and noble and perfect in man. I think they have been accustomed to regard Jesus not so much in the light of a spiritual deliverer as that of a second Moses, who would eventually lead them out of their prison of or their prison house of bondage. It said this reverses the use of the story by European settlers in North America who have thought of their journey from Europe to the New World as a new exodus, right? From Egypt to the Promised Land. For their African slaves, America means Egypt, where they were held in bondage under a new Pharaoh. The story of the Exodus serves as a vision of a better future for the slaves on the one hand. So that is what's really going on, at the beginning of this whole thing. Now, this actually did have deeper origins, but I actually decided to start it right there because it's actually started to go back to just how we as African people got down in general, right? Took it all the way back to Brazil and Santeria and the reason why we do what we do, right? History goes deep. But out of all this kind of way of really putting ourselves in the Exodus, after we're praying for a deliverer, right? Hold on. Uh-oh. Okay, good. All right, can I still be heard? All right, once again, can I still be heard? I'm trying to make sure that I'm good. All right, anyway. So with that being said, out of all this kind of way of associating ourselves with Israel because of what we're going through, and all of a sudden we read about, what the Israelites are going through. Well, yes, all of a sudden there was this kind of connection. And guess what came out of that? Now, this is one of the ways. This is F.S. Cherry and William S. Crowdy. I'm going to read about F.S. Cherry real quick. Now, there were some people saying he was born in 1868, but no one really knows. I still kind of kept it there. It says, toward the end of the 19th century, a man named Frank S. Cherry claimed to receive a vision through which God told him to present the message to African Americans that they are the true descendants of the biblical Hebrews. This eventually resulted in the establishment of the Church of the Living God, the pillar and ground of the truth for all nations in Chattanooga, Tennessee, around 1886. One of the things that, pretty much kind of like was not a summary, but one of the things that F.S. Cherry would end up saying is that he said white people were descendants of Gehazi, who were cursed with leprosy as white as snow. Whites are also described as wicked, unrighteous, and rejectors of God. That comes from Black Zion, and also, you know, I think Ami had ended up saying some of those things as well. Ben Ami. The reason why I put that there is because Ben Ami is not the first person to say those kind of things. You could trace those kind of ways back to F.S. Cherry. Once you go ahead and look it on the right, this is William S. Crowdy. He's born in 1847, died in 1908. Basically, they called him a prophet. Prophet William S. Crowdy. He claimed to receive a revelation that the African Americans were the descendants of the ancient Israelites. And after receiving this revelation, Crowdy founded the Church of God and Saints of Christ in 1896 in Kansas. And then from there it says, with the claim that the 10 lost tribes of Israel were the ancestors of black people, Crowdy traveled around the United States preaching his message and was often mistreated by locals. Although he taught Jesus was black, his earliest converts were white. I don't know how that works, but hey, I mean, it is what it is. Now, F.S. Cherry, or actually William S. Crowdy, he was a little different. I mean, he did have some snarly things to say, but this quote right here kind of stood out for me. This is what he said. He said, the more they denounce me, the more people pack my services. I came to this city less than a year ago from Texas and have taken over 1,300 converts. He said that they are jealous of my success. I teach my people to love one another, keep the commandments, pay their honest debts, and abstain from alcohol and tobacco. If that's anarchy and false doctrine, I'm willing to take a back seat. Mayor Astridge has seen my work and he finds no offense in me. FS Cherry. So now all of a sudden, you're starting to see people going from associating themselves with the Israelites just through get together services for where people are starting to now receive visions and starting to turn their visions and their doctrines and all this stuff into actual denominations, right? This is where it's all starting. Matter of fact, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was FS Cherry or William S. Crowdy, but one of them actually prayed to Moses. They were in a time of great turmoil. I don't know what it was, but they prayed to Moses. Now, ain't that something? That shows the context of their day, right? He prayed to Moses for something, and all of a sudden there was a good outcome. And so, once again, this is one of the ways where you start to see why people are starting to cling on to, the law, statutes, and commandments. This stuff just did not come out of nowhere. It had early origins. Now, of course, there was another woman. I'm sorry, there was a woman named Mother Mary. Mother Mary Magdalene Lewis. One of the things I liked about her, she said that when she was called to the leadership, and by the way, she was a bishop, she was an overseer who actually ordained a lot of men, and also she hundreds of women actually served in her church as well. One thing that was marked by her was she always preached about cleanliness, and also she always ended up preaching very plainly. In other words, she wasn't eloquent with her speech. She pretty much just kind of told you how it is. You know, Mother Mary Magdalene, Lewis Tate. And so she actually had a very similar naming church, the Church of the Living God, Pillar and Ground of the Truth, right? But it wasn't it didn't say for all nations, even though it was. Um, Now her website, now it's still up. You could definitely check out some things here. Definitely check it out. That's what I always say. Definitely check it out. Now, I don't know why, but it seems that I kind of overlapped certain words there. There was something that was supposed to be said there, but basically it was just other denominations that began to spring forth during the time, which is the reason why I later on put Rabbi Matthew Wentworth, and also Ben Ami. They were also part of those later denominations that actually sprung up. Obviously, I don't even have to really go over much with this one. There have been people such as Faithful to God and Keith True Thompson who have broken this chart down way better than me. So if you guys definitely want to go ahead and check out what they do, check out Faithful to God and what's his name? Keith True Thompson. You know, like I said, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna sit this here just to show you that when it comes to how big this movement became, this is the fruit of it. So now all of a sudden you have someone who broke off from, Rabbi Matthew Wentworth. And his name was Abba Bivens, also called Aber Benjamin. From there, he had four students. And after he died, his four students decided to continue to take up his cause. Eventually, there became seven of them, and they were known as the Seven. It's a big backstory. But one of them ended up, breaking off, and another one ended up breaking off, from the house of David, making himself the house of David. Another one, Shar, he started the ICUPK. That became something else, the ICGJC. From there were people who spread off from the House of David, such as IUIC, right? GMS, they spread off from the House of David, and of course, Zabak. He split off from the house of David and he just called himself the house of Israel. And it goes on and on and on. And it's all because of, you know, different doctrines, but it is also because of failed prophecies. I want you to keep that in mind because that is key to what you're looking at all over this chart here. That is one of the reasons why you had these splints. So if you ever want to know any kind of messianic One West camps, they're all right here. You can go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to go ahead and move on. So if I could sum up one common belief among all Hebrew Israelites, whether they're one Westers, whether they're moderates, whether they're just black messianics or whatever, they will all tell you the following. And this is a quote from Ben Ami, but I think, you know, this just says it the best from Ben Ami. I got to give it to Ben Ami. He died in 2014. He says a cruel plot to control us, an international religious plot that came about as a result of blacks disobeying the law and commandments of God. The enslavement of black Africans is seen as a punishment for straying from the righteous path that he, Ben Ami, cites as, quote, an oral tradition that our people were cursed by God for violating his laws, statutes, and commandments, end quote, Ben Ami. If that is not the theological national anthem for anyone that claims to be an Israelite, then I don't know what is. Because every time you ask them why are blacks in the condition that they are in, that is exactly what they say. That is their story. But don't worry. In part two, I'm gonna get into I'm basically gonna challenge that. You know, for one, we got the new covenant and all this other stuff, but we're gonna challenge that. But for right now, that's the reason why they say what they say, right? So you're probably wondering these Hebrew moderates, Hebrew roots, British Israelism, One West, Black Hebrew Israelites, KKK, Christian identity. Like, where did all this come from? Now for how it all began, right? If I could sum it up into one thing where all this began, this is based on my personal research. If I could sum it up in one word, how all this actually started, it's because of one thing: millenarianism. You see, I started to kind of think about it. It pretty much hit me. I said, wait a minute, I think I'm studying in the wrong direction. I don't need to study about the past. I think I need to study about the theology of their future and find out that in the past. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. Started digging and digging. I found something called chiliasm, and it is the Greek word that means 1,000, right? Mille for the Latin. Eventually, I ran into millenarianism. Never heard of millenarianism in my life. But if I were to sum up millenarianism, it's basically a Christian doctrine. I mean, it is true. Like, we do believe that, you know, Christ's going to come back and make things better. But listen to the definition of this. This is a short version of millenarianism. And you tell me who you hear in these kind of things. Apostolic Christianity demonstrates many of the key traits of apostolic millenarian groups of the second demonic type. And what is that? The rhetoric of the meek overcoming the powerful and arrogant, the imminence of the Lord's day, the day of wrath, and the coming of the kingdom of heaven, a leader and a following among common working people. Rituals of initiation into a group, preparing for awaiting the end, fervent spirituality, and radical restructuring of community bonds, large enthusiastic crowds, prominence of women visionaries, the shift from a disappointed messianic hope, crucifixion, to a revised expectation, second coming or parousia. Millenarianism. It's all going to be all right in the end. This is what people begin to think. And so you have to ask yourself, if people begin to, you know, kind of contemplate these things, then of course they will contemplate when these things will be. They will contemplate what has to take place within the church for this thing to be. They will have to contemplate, how does the church have to operate? What does the church have to believe in order for these things to be? It all ties in. And depending on what race or what religion or what culture you talk to will depend on what kind of spin that you will get on this millenarianism, end times, doctrines of the church, how the church has to be without spot or wrinkle. What does that mean? Do you see now? There's something I did not put in my slides, but you can look this up. You can look up every time someone has failed at predicting when Christ will come back. And millenarianism is all through it. There's nothing wrong with millenarianism. It's just what people are doing with it, right? By the way, please let me know if I can't be heard. I hope to God I can still be heard. All right. Anyway, this is a long version. Now, I really put this in there because I want to read this to you and tell me. Just close your eyes for a moment and simply tell me what, let me know in the comment section or whatever what you hear when you hear this. All right. Literally, millennialism, right, which is another version of millenarianism, refers to the belief expressed in the book of Revelation that Christ will establish a 1,000-year reign of the saints on earth before the last judgment. More broadly defined, millennialists expect a time of supernatural peace and abundance here on earth. At its origins, millennialism offers a concrete version of the fundamental eschatological belief that at the end of time, God will judge the living and the resurrection and the dead. This belief is an ultimate divine justice, has provided the solution to the problem of the theodicy of the countless generations of believers, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, suffering hardship and oppression, and has therefore had immense appeal for commoners of every age. The key issues in terms of millennialism's impact on society, however, is a matter of timing. As long as the day of redemption is not yet come, millennial hopes console the suffering and inspire patience for Revelation 13:10, and political quiescence, and have a profoundly conservative influence, but driven by a sense of imminence, right? Apocalyptic believers can become disruptive, even engaging in revolutionary efforts to overthrow an unjust socio-political order in an attempt to bring about the kingdom of peace for the meek and the defenseless. Thus, apocalyptic millennialism constitutes a powerful and volatile mixture, fascinating hearts and minds of people throughout the ages. No matter how often the apocalyptic beliefs have been proven wrong over and over and over again until the present always, no expectations repeatedly revive, right? It says it says no matter how often the millennial efforts uh to establish God's kingdom on earth have led to disastrous results, apocalyptic expectations repeatedly revive. From the Jewish revolts against Rome, which led to hundreds of thousands of deaths in 3 CE, 66 CE, 132 to 135 CE, right? Talk about the Bar Kokhba Wars, 135. To the Taiping Rebellion that led to the death of 20 to 35 million people, such movements have had a tendency to self-destruct in the most spectacular fashion. So someone tries to predict when Christ comes back, and we're going to have a race war. And yet, the year 2000 passes, and well, you have more people who just not only leave the cult, but they leave the Bible, they leave Christ altogether. So these movements have a tendency to self-destruct in the most spectacular fashion. And yet, for all the costly failures, the appeal remains, and generation after generation finds devotees in search of the chimerical kingdom. Apocalyptic millenarianism, for all its dangers, offers immense rewards. Believers find themselves at the center of the ultimate universal drama, and their every act, has cosmic significance. So I read something in the newspaper. I see something on the news. Oh, you know what? Sounds like Israel. Sounds like we're coming closer to the end times. No, yeah, that's right. Look, you find yourself at the center of the ultimate universal drama. You don't find Christ at the center. You find you at the center. What does the story have to do with you? What are you going to get out of it? Apocalyptic believers become semiotically aroused, if not semiotically promiscuous, right? And I think semiotic is a word, I think it means philosophical or something like that. I have to look that up. Finding cosmic messages in the smallest incident, in every coincidence. Moreover, they can almost taste the fulfillment of their burning desire to see justice done, the good lavishly rewarded, the evil savagely punished. Finally, the approach of the end times and the promise of a new world liberates believers from all earthly inhibitions. The fear of future punishment by those who now hold power vanishes. And a wide range of represented feelings, whether sexual, emotional, violent, burst forth, right? If we're all going to be all right, it doesn't matter how I treat these people over here. They're going to all burn anyway. They're God's enemies. It doesn't matter. Such a combination proves irresistible to many. Well, yeah, I mean, if you got a fallen nature that you have not checked in the Lord Jesus, yeah, I bet it is irresistible. Millennial hopes possesses believers. If that is the case, if this millenarianism has went through every age, what's been its result? I mean, does it have anything to do with all the denominations that we have now? Well, let's go ahead and find out. From millenarianism to Hebrewism, the end of the world, 1843. You know, we're going to be talking about a man, a man named William Miller. William Miller was a pretty interesting dude. You know, I definitely do get a lot of respect for him. I think he was born in 1872. Yep. No, 1782. I'm sorry. Oh man, I was 100 years off. William Miller was born February 15th, 1782, died December 20th, 1849. This guy, like I said, I definitely had a lot of respect for. He basically grew up in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was known as the burned over district back in that day because of all the revivalism and the Great Awakenings, right? And I would love to talk about that because the Great Awakening was actually a reaction to the rational movement, right? The rationalist movement, Enlightenment movement. You know, they had thought that things were basically becoming too doctrinal and that the church was missing something. Well, of course, with some good old millenarianism, of course, they could use a sweep of revivalism. A lot of times you could get so excited about God that, you know, you start to wonder how soon is it going to be before you get to meet him. Then all of a sudden, you naturally start to wonder, well, I wonder if he is coming back. I'm so excited over the revivalism. Maybe we could kind of find out. Do you see how millenarianism continues to creep back in? Right? Ah, thank you, Gretchen. Semiotics, the study of origins and symbols and their use of interpretation. So that's what semiotic means. So anyway, yeah, William Miller pretty much grew up in the Burnover district, which is the reason why his mother was like very strict, and she was very devoted to Christianity. And so was Miller until he grew up and got around his colleagues who were essentially just atheists and you know rationalists and agnostics of the day. And pretty much because I guess he didn't understand his word a lot, he didn't understand how to combat what they say, and so they literally, I hate to say it, they pretty much talked him out of his own faith. Let that sink in. A devoted mother who raises her boy in the faith, but yet a rationalist or agnostic or atheist comes along, and all of a sudden he loses faith. I wonder what he was not taught. It's one thing to have the Bible, but you still have to, learn about other things too. You have to have balance in your life. So to make a long story short, he joined the war of 1812. And it was during that time that when he was in the war, he actually saw a lot of his friends die. Sometimes it was just a few feet right in front of him. What he kind of thought to himself at that moment was he personally felt that the hand of God was on his life, because to him it just didn't make sense that his closest friends would die at such close range, but yet he was just okay. I mean, yeah, he had a few bumps and bruises, but when you go through something that catastrophic, you do kind of think about that. Well, why didn't I die? And it was because of that he found himself coming back into his faith. To make a long story short, he pretty much studied the Bible for 16 years straight. The dude was just rock solid with it. And that's because, that was the reason why he came up with this whole, year end prophecy of, God is going to return between the years 1843 and 1844. And yeah, all of a sudden, as much people started to ridicule him, the closer it got to the date, the more people started to follow him. And all of a sudden, they started to call themselves Millerites. Even though William Miller had no intention of that, but they just started following him like that because, hey, it's like, hey, this guy's talking about the end of the world. People were getting happy. Next thing you know, the prediction failed in 1843. But then Miller thought, wait a minute, I'm sorry, guys. I was not using a Jewish calendar. And so all of a sudden, he decided to use a Jewish calendar, and he kind of, I think he said either March or April, ironically, March or April, 1844. So finally, when that fell, oh man, he was really run through. And it was at that point that he wrote down, he just said, look, I confess, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm wrong. I'm done. And that was it. or so you thought it was it. All those Millerites and those people that were looking for the great advent, keyword, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, they didn't let Miller go that easily. Miller was like, you know what, man, look, hey, I tried, y'all. I gave it 16 years. I was honest. I tried. I'm sorry. And one of his, attendees, I think attendees, his name was, I think it was Edson. Yeah, Edison. And Edison, he said, no, bruh. Like, I think you're just looking at this thing wrong, you know? And so finally, he ended up saying, like, it's going to happen on October 22nd, 1844. And of course, everyone got ready. People were actually selling their homes. They sold their stock. There were people that were actually dressed in white, waiting on their rooftops. I mean, people got hyped. They wanted Christ to come back. Can you imagine that? Boys are sold out. This is a revivalism era, the second great awakening. You get excited about Jesus that much, you better believe this is going to be the thing that'll hit you. And what happened? Man, that is the reason why October 22nd, 1844 was known as the Great Disappointment. Yeah, there's other stuff that was called the Midnight Cry and the Loud Cry. I don't want to get into that, but that was part of it too and all that. But I mean, after that, people were just, oh man, they were just running through. Miller, he's definitely feeling bad now, you know. But then one day, on October 23rd, 1844, the next day, I think there was a guy named Fitch. Fitch was pretty much, walking through the cornfield because he was pretty embarrassed. He ain't want to show his face in front of all the other Methodists that pretty much kicked all the Millerites out their church. And he had a vision, y'all. All of a sudden, oh, and by the way, let me know if I can be heard because I'm not trying to risk nothing. Anyway, he had a vision. He said, you know what? Christ didn't like go come down to earth. He went up. He didn't go down. He went up into the most holy place. And so all of a sudden, I'm not sure if they ran back and told Miller or not, but that actually started to spread. I think they did go back and tell Miller. They said, no, I had a vision. I know it really happened. See, God went up, Jesus, same difference. He went up into the most holy place, right? Because you had the holy place, and then you had the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. He went in there to cleanse the temple. William Miller, bro, remember you were talking about how God is going to come and cleanse the temple and cleanse the sanctuary, and he's going to judge? Well, he was going to do that all in heaven. And that's what they said. So they said, you know what? So he did end up coming back. He did end up returning. And so the Millerites, they ended up hoping once more, right? But then after that, there was somebody else actually came along too. And I think his name was James White. No, not the one we know. He ended up taking it further. No. It was Joseph Bates. I think it was Joseph Bates. There was a dude named Joseph Bates. Now, Joseph Bates came along and he said, you know what? I know another reason why Christ didn't come back too. It wasn't just to go ahead and cleanse the temple and all that, but it was for more like an investigative judgment type. Basically, we're not keeping the fourth commandment. We're not keeping the commandments. I mean, how is he going to come back for a church that ain't keeping the commandments? You're not keeping the Sabbath. And so they thought to themselves, like, wait a minute, yeah, like, we're not keeping the Sabbath. And so from 6 p.m. Friday to 6 p.m. Saturday, all of a sudden, people are now starting to, like, keep the Sabbath. They're like, you know what? Yeah, we got to go to keep Sabbath because you know what? God ain't coming back for a church with spot or wrinkle. He's coming back with a church without spot or wrinkle. How are we going to go ahead and say we end up following God and we don't keep his commandments? And so all of a sudden, the people who were Millerite Adventists, all of a sudden they started keeping the fourth commandment, which is the Sabbath. And during this whole time, there was a woman named Ellen whose whole family was following Millerites ever since she was a kid, who ended up, being disappointed too. But she ended up, adopting the whole Sabbath keeping thing. So now all of a sudden, you got these Millerites that are starting to keep the Sabbath, right? And they eventually called themselves Adventists. And of course, this is where Ellen G. White comes in, wife of James White. The same James White that ended up saying that, we are the true remnant and ain't no other church got it but us. Now, of course, Ellen White, she really started to go ahead and take on this thing. But, something happened to her. One of the real reasons why Ellen G. White really took off was because one day, we don't know how it happened, but she got hit in the head, or in the face, in the temple with a huge boulder, huge rock, something. It hit her so hard that it knocked her out for like, I think probably like a week or two. She was in a coma for a week or two. Had family just praying for her, standing by her bedside, you know. And all of a sudden, when she came out that coma, she was different. Everybody knew she was different. And that is the Ellen G. White from that day on that began to have a little bit of seizures, a lot of dreams, a lot of visions, a lot of prophecies. And all of a sudden, she had a dream and a vision where you had Adventists going to heaven, and everybody else that were in different denominations, well, they kept on falling off the wayside. They kept falling off the bridge, but only the Adventists were making it through. And all of a sudden, she had these other visions about these three angels that came through. And one of the angels, the third angel, had two banners alongside him. One said the commandments of God, the other one said the faith of Christ Jesus. And so what she did was she looked back and she said, "Oh, James White is right, Fitch is right, and Edison is right." And they're today, known as the three angels that, had the prophecies. It was James White, which was the husband of Ellen G. White, that ended up saying that the church is going to always have a word of prophecy because the church is the remnant. We are the true remnant. And they got that from Daniel. He said there's always going to be this kind of prophecy that follows the true remnant. And of course, his wife fits the bill. And so it was because of that, they ended up forming the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, of course, about 3 to 5 years before they formed the church, there was another group that kind of broke off from them, right? Oh, yeah. Almost forgot about this. Shoot. Let me go ahead through this real quick. I want you guys to see these kind of three angel prophecy that was, interpreted through Ellen G. White. She looked at them as the three angels. One angel number one, obviously, was William Miller. He said he has an everlasting gospel to preach to all who are on the earth. It says, for the hour of his judgment has come, right? The message of the imminent coming of Jesus was preached by the Millerite movement, then fulfilled the prophecy of the first angel's message. Just as Ellen G. White had, looked back and said, yep, it was him. Second angel was this guy, Charles Fitch. Tell me if this don't sound familiar. Babylon the Great is fallen because she caused all nations to drink the wrath of her fornication. Preaching during the summer of 1844. Oh, wow, the summer of 1844, right? So this is before October, which was preceded by a significant number of Millerites leaving the movement, right? Just before they all left and found out it was wrong, there was one message he preached, and resulted in large numbers of Christians leaving their churches, which he called Babylon. Isn't that interesting? And joining the Advent movement. His message was, "Come out of her, my people," which was based on Revelation 18:2 and 4. Who does that sound like to you today? The group out there. Now, of course, back in the day, they always said that the Catholic Church was that. You know what I mean? All the Protestants said that, Catholic Church is Babylon. Now, all of a sudden, it takes a switch. That if your church ain't teaching what we teaching, then your church is Babylon. Where did that come from? Came from this dude right here. How about this one here? Angel number 3, James White, husband of Ellen White. If anyone worships the beast, worships on Sunday instead of the Sabbath, and receives his mark, they shall drink the cup of God's wrath. The first and second angels' message, and the third, were unfurling the banner on which was inscribed the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So that's where the idea that, oh, you know what, we got to go ahead and, make sure that we're keeping the Sabbath. James White, he ended up saying that too now. But yet they call worshiping, they call, worshiping the beast, worshiping on Sunday. I'm going to say it again. He calls worshiping the beast worshiping on Sunday, y'all. You see where this is coming from? Are you putting it all together? You think people are standing out in the street corners just saying all this stuff and echoing all this stuff because all of a sudden they studied the word real deep and all of a sudden they found a revelation? Nah. Same playbook. Devil know what he doing. So now let me put it all together. Even though there are some other things I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I wanted to speak about the split that happened before the SDA movement. But since this chart is going to get into it, I'll just go ahead and let it do. So let's look at this and put it all together. So one, you got a guy named William Miller. Two, he basically preaches Christ is soon to return. He has an exact date. Of course, three turned into Adventism. Four, basically it was a failed prediction multiple times. Five, and once again, you had a fall away and denominational splits. That is the worst thing to happen. You got all these falling away, and now all of a sudden you got denominational splits. So you have people saying, you know what, I quit, I'm out. And then you got other people saying, you know what, I think they got it wrong. I think we could do it better. 6, you got faithful Adventists like Hiram Edson. He had a vision in the cornfield, right? We all know what that was. 7, we aren't keeping the Sabbath. So Jesus didn't come back. That was a vision. So now all of a sudden, people are starting to keep Sabbath. 8, you had the investigative judgment, right? Our chronology of events. So now all of a sudden they're trying to go back and be like, okay, now because Christ went down and he went up, instead of going down, he went up to cleanse the temple, all this stuff. Now he's doing the investigative judgment. Going to find out who are the real Christians, who's the real remnant. That's what he's doing now, right? How are we going to find out who the true remnant is? Going to send the prophets. Prophets going to send a message. Message is going to get to those who believe. Some believe that are in the church is called, that they call Babylon. Do you see how this is all coming together? 9, then after that, you got Ellen G. White. She followed Miller and carried his vision with the help of his followers. 10, she became leader and a prophet of the SDA church. Long story short, y'all. By the way, there were some extra notes, right? She ended up practicing temperance. Do you know that she got on the men a lot? Oh my gosh. She said, look, man, y'all got to stop drinking. Y'all got to stop smoking. Y'all got to get your lives together. She was one of the people that kind of pioneered the temperance movement. She was serious about that. Ellen G. White wasn't nothing to play with. Ellen G. White straightened you up. I'll give her that. Now, unlike Miller, Ellen G. White, she wasn't like educated or anything. Miller, he was, he did his thing. Unlike Miller said, hey, you know what? I'm wrong. I'm sorry, y'all. Ellen G. White? Nope. She never admitted that she was wrong. Even about some of her prophecies and stuff. Which is the reason why I think what's going to happen on the next page. But anyway, yeah, man, I've heard little stories about her, like, eating shrimp every once in a while. And it's like, you can't eat unclean food. I mean, she would say that stuff. But yet, she'd be eating shrimp a little bit. But nevertheless, I mean, she was a woman, So then after that, you had a guy, right? He was a Unitarian Christian. A Unitarian Christian Connection minister. Christian Connection, look it up. It's basically about having certain churches independently connected, right? But they're not under any kind of like jurisdictional denomination, right? They all just kind of hang together. Look up Christian Connection. It's pretty cool. Basically, he rejected the visions and teachings of Ellen G. White. Now, I didn't like find out why all that much, which I should have, but I just kind of left it alone. I said, all right, well, before they ended up forming the SDA church, this dude and a few others broke away. It just said he rejected the visions, he rejected the teachings. Obviously, he had an issue with them both. Maybe he found something inconsistent. I don't know what it is, right? So he actually formed the Church of God Seventh Day, right? And so because of that, you had people who are now all of a sudden starting to think, now this is for the Church of God Seventh Day. I'm showing you how this all came about. People in the Church of God Seventh Day, they started noticing that, okay, well, we're keeping the Sabbath and that's cool, but we don't have any order. We need more order. We need to be way more organized, especially in Oregon. And so people that were in the Church of God Seventh Day, they say, okay, we broke away from Ellen G. White, all right, but we need to have some order. So people were trying to like really establish order, right? Yeah, people were division over the law and Passover dates to set in. And all of a sudden, there was a guy named, I think it was, Clarence Orville died. Now I'm trying to remember how this goes. How did this go? There was Clarence Orville died, Dr. John R. Briggs, and also there was a third guy named Herbert Armstrong. But he comes down a little later in the picture. But he's part of the whole organization thing. They wanted to pick 12 people, and they just cast these lots on these 12 people to get the Church of God Seventh Day organized. And one of those lots fell on Herbert Armstrong. So John R. Briggs, Clarence Orville Dodd, and Herbert Armstrong are in the, Church of God Seventh Day. Huh. Oh wow. What did he say? He said every now and then Ellen took a dive. Funny. So as they're trying to go in and get this order, these men are actually being influenced by other stuff. So for example, you got Dr. John R. Briggs. He ends up being influenced by one of his students that he's teaching. And this student was like from like the Ukraine, or he was from Russia or something like that. And even when I was looking into information, they said not a lot is known about this dude, this student that he had. All he knows is that they said he influenced him to look at the word Christ again. And so John R. Briggs, he basically came to the conclusion with his studies with his student and said, you know what? The English word Christ is of pagan origin. From there, this kind of sacred names and sacred Hebrew names takes flight. Now, Clarence Orville died. He ended up kind of buying into it too. Now, meanwhile, all these guys are in the Church of God Seventh Day, right? And they're coming to these conclusions. Charles Dodd, he founds Faith magazine. Now, someone says, quote, no single force in spreading the sacred name movement was as important as the Faith magazine, J.G. Melton. So now all of a sudden, you have also Clarence Orville Dodd, who started talking to Armstrong, right? And he was starting to tell Armstrong about this stuff, how they should be keeping the feast days and holy days and all that, and not just the Sabbath. John R. Briggs, he obviously agreed, but Armstrong was told by Clarence Orville Dodd to actually study a guy named Rupert. And he said, look, man, not only should you be doing this, but study a guy named Rupert. He's pretty cool, right? This is all setting in the Church of God Seventh Day. They have no clue about these dudes quite yet. Now check this out. So who is Rupert? And why did Clarence Orville Dodd tell Armstrong to study him? I decided to dig into Rupert because obviously, Armstrong is studying Rupert before they even split off. I'm telling y'all, all this stuff got formed. Now it says that Rupert was an American Adventist pastor and writer associated with British Israelism and dispensationalism. We all know dispensationalism is all about Israel. Rah, rah, rah. His religious ideology was linked to a theory that the last days would see a power struggle between the Orient, which is the East, and the Occident, which is the West. A view that helped to fuel the Yellow Peril Panic. What was the Yellow Peril Panic? If you look up what the Yellow Peril Panic was, it was this fear that the Asians were going to come on in and take over. Those yellow people were going to come on in and take over. So this British Israelism dude was really worried about race in ways that, other people that aren't British Israelism weren't. Ain't that something? It's funny how British Israelism really puts race at the forefront of theology. Now, this is a dude that influenced Herbert W. Armstrong, right? And that is the reason why there's always these complaints from the Church of God Seventh Day when they say we had to get rid of Armstrong because he started bringing British Israelism into the picture. That's the reason why they say it. He just didn't pick that up out of nowhere. Also, Mildred Kevling, right? A lifelong acquaintance who had served for many years as his personal secretary, claimed that Dodd's acquaintance with the Worldwide Church of God founder, Herbert W. Armstrong, influenced the latter's views. She specified that Dodd convinced Armstrong of Greenberry G. Rupert's author of The Yellow Peril assertions that observing Hebrew holidays is mandatory for a Christian. That's how the sacred name basically got its kick. It got its kick within the Church of God Seventh Day. So now all of a sudden, you got these people that are inside the Church of God Seventh Day doing all this stuff. And guess what? When the Church of God Seventh Day found out, they said, nah, bro, we ain't about this. Keeping feast days. British Israelism, what? They said, nah, get out. And all of a sudden they looked at Dodd and the other guy, Briggs. They said, what do you mean sacred name? No, look in Exodus. We don't need to say some sacred name. They had battles about that. I think Herbert W. Armstrong, he went to the board twice about what he believed. And they said, all right, you know what, fine. If this is what you believe, get out. And so he took their money. I think that was the Grammy part. He took their money, right? The little treasury or whatever. Kind of remind you of some people. He took their money and started a little radio program with his own little ministry. And it was called the Radio Church of God. Eventually, it was called the Worldwide Church of God. And he started teaching about feast days and all this and that. As far as Clarence Orville Dodd and John R. Briggs with the whole sacred name, with the name, you got to say the name right, and the English and the Hebrew and this and that, they took that and they did their own thing too. I think it was John R. Briggs who ended up founding the Assemblies of Yahweh. So these three brothers basically kicked off every, sacred name, Hebrew root, Hebrew feast day doctrine, you name it. And these brothers made books upon books. And plus, they already had a treasure trove from British Israelism because they ended up writing books upon books about certain stuff anyway. So you can see all this stuff is growing. That's where it came from. And if anybody, for any reason, wanted to go ahead and take all this Hebrew stuff and make it black, they had all the theological treasure troves of theology and books of information that they could ever need coming from these three dudes. You don't believe me? Check this out. I ain't even going to say all that. Sacred Name Bibles. That's all I'll say. All right. I admit, I'm going to read it. John R. Briggs met Mr. August Sheffick, who insisted that the English word Christ was of pagan origin. Dr. Briggs thereupon began to emphasize the Hebrew word Yahshua. He was in association with an A.B. Traina in an assembly in New Jersey. Apparently, he was going somewhat overboard, and Mr. Traina insisted he calm down. Isn't that interesting? Whereupon Dr. Briggs and a Jewish man, Paul Penn, departed to Detroit. Their names evangelization program, ain't that something? Names evangelization program. Hebrew names, right? And Kadesh Name Society began there in February 1937, right in Detroit. This group first attained a charter as Assemblies of Yahweh and later as Yahweh Beth Israel. There it is. As far as Sacred Name Bibles, you can look to the right. You got transliterated Sacred Name Bibles. You got Tetragrammaton Sacred Name Bibles. And they coming out the woodwork. Look, 1950, 1963, 1970, 1981, 1987, 2000, 2003, 2012, and it goes on. That's how all this stuff picked up. You had the theology from the one hand, and you had the movement on the other. I'm going to say it one more time. You had the theology of the Europeans and Americans on the one hand, and then after that, you had the movement of the African Americans on the other hand. You think at some point they didn't start intertwining and intercrossing between all them centuries and decades? Well, mainly decades, right? Throughout the century. Put it all together. I just showed you two timelines. Message echoes. Message echoes. Come out of her. It's a famous phrase, right? Book of Revelation about Babylon. In the Book of Revelation is they always say that the Babylon in the Book of Revelation is a papacy according to, the position of most Protestants, right? Okay. However, that actually came from, once again, Fitch. And guess what Dr. Ben, or not Dr. Ben, but guess what Ben Ami ended up saying? He ended up saying the same thing. The anti-God individual mentioned in Daniel 7:25 is spiritually and prophetically the European nations. African Americans are farther away from God when they live in European societies. The call of Revelation 18:4 to come out of Babylon is a prophetic warning and command for African Americans to separate from America, since the American government is totally hellish and evil. There can be no good people in its midst. So blacks must come out of her. Ben Ami. Fitch just said, you know what? If you ain't in our church, then, hey, you're in Babylon. You need to come out. Ben Ami, he took it to a whole nother level. Jacob's trouble. It is called the time of Jacob's trouble, for it is a judgment against Messiah rejecting Israel. Especially in Daniel, right? Daniel's always prophesying about, hey, you know what? Temple going to be destroyed. Y'all rejected your Messiah. Jacob's trouble. Ellen G. White has a little doctrine called times of trouble. Said God's people are sustained by heavenly power and protection as they go through the time of trouble, tribulation. The time of trouble begins when Jesus makes a pronouncement in heaven, right? He who is just let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. He who is holy, let him be holy still. Revelation 22:11. Time of trouble. Now, what do they say over here? They end up saying Jacob's trouble, right? Yah promises he will save Jacob, referring to Israel and Judah, out of this time of great trouble. Verse 7. I will surely save you out of a distant place, your descendants from a land of their captivity. Jacob's trouble. Echoes, y'all. Same thing. Wars and tumult. Wars and tumult. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Luke 21:10. Verse 9 says, wars and tumult. Tumult. Violent and noisy commotion or disturbance of a crowd or mob. Uproar. Wars and tumult. Now, what did F.S. Cherry say? He said Jesus will return in the year 2000 to install blacks over whites through a race war. Who does that sound like? Didn't the Comforter and everybody else, not Comforter, I don't think, didn't everyone before the Comforter carry that same message from F.S. Cherry? Didn't they carry that? What about the KKK, Christian Identity Movement? It says that they assorted militias piling up arms for what they say is a coming race war in America that will precede the return of Christ. Washington Post, the coming race war in America. Echoes, y'all. Echo. It's the end of session 1. Listen, I really hope that what I showed you guys tonight really was eye-opening. Look at what you believe. Look at the people that believe what you believe. Look at those people on what they believed, what you believe. Look at the people's people of what they believe, what they believed. And it all goes back. All of it goes back. You got people coming from the Second Great Awakening movement. You think that just affected blacks? Everybody was getting excited about Christ. Everyone was getting excited about the Holy Spirit. They wanted to be closer to God. Revival. Come, Lord Jesus, with your kingdom. We're so excited about you. We want more of you. When is he coming back? I don't know. Maybe we can find out. Hey, y'all, he's coming back on this date. Oh, really? We're already excited enough. Now we're more excited. More revival. Oh, he didn't come back. We must be doing something wrong. What aren't we doing right? Oh, man, you know what? We're not keeping the 4th commandment. We got to do that. It's not enough just to be Adventists. We got to be Seventh-day Adventists. And you know what? We're going to do all these other things too. Church of God 7 Days said, nah, man, y'all wrong. And they left. Then after that, people inside Church of God 7th Day like Dodd and Armstrong and other people started getting other interesting ideas. They led them to believe that you have to keep more than the Sabbath. They led them to believe that, you know what, it wasn't just enough to call on the name of the Lord in whatever language or tongue that you use. They incubated all that stuff in the Church of God 7 Day. Church of God 7 Day said, look, what in the world are y'all doing? Who told y'all to get all that? Armstrong and Dodd and all the rest of them, they said, well, look, I think it's got to be this way. Church of God 7 Day said, heck nah, get out. And they left. And guess what? Here's another cliff note. Armstrong, I ain't put this in the presentation, but Armstrong made 4 failed prophecies. So just like Ellen White and all the rest of them, they were trying to guess, the time that God was going to do this stuff and whatever. Brother ended up failing 4 times. Do you know how much money Armstrong made from his movement? Man, it put you to tears reading some of that stuff. Those people gave their lives, man. They gave their last dime to stay a part of Church of God. And Worldwide Church of God. Yeah. So that's why when they failed all them prophecies, 1, 2, 3, 4, you put in more money, Christ's gonna come back. Man, it's all gonna be over. This stuff don't even matter. Material world don't even matter. It's all gonna be over. I know you sacrifice a lot, but look, Christ's about to come back. It's about to be all good. And all of a sudden, he don't come back. And you rode through 4 failed prophecies in that church. Guess what's gonna happen? Those people leave. They believe and they leave. They become atheists. They become agnostics. They don't want nothing to do with the Bible because every time they look at it, they think about everything that they gave up. And they leave, y'all. They leave God. And this stuff still goes on today. And so if we let these people continue to be sucked out of the church, it's funny because look at what it said in Timothy. It said in the last days there will be a great falling away. It said that Hymenaeus and Alexander ended up, amen, bro, amen. It said Hymenaeus and Alexander, they end up drawing away disciples to themselves. How is it that in the last days, people are going to be waking up, but yet that requires them to leave the church, when in your own New Testament, it says there will be a great falling away from the church? Everyone is telling you today to wake up. I'm woke. I'm woke. Where do you think that came from, fam? Have you heard of the first Great Awakening? Have you heard of the second Great Awakening? You think they were just saying that just to say it? Maybe back in the day, like it was awakening of, okay, look, man, I need more of the Holy Ghost in my life. Revival. I mean, come on. A reaction to the Enlightenment and rationalist movement that doctrinalized the church to death. I mean, it all goes back. It really does. I could trace it further back than that, because a lot of them dudes were actually, they were actually churchmen, but they became deists. They ended up looking at the harsh doctrine that I'm not going to get into, but they didn't like, the God of the Bible after a while. Anyway, either way, they said, look, I'm a deist now. I believe God created everything, and after that, he left everything alone. People looked at the deists and they said, well, bruh, if he left everything alone, then how do you know that you're communicating with God if he leaves everything alone? That means he leaves you alone. So the question is, deist, who you talking to? And the deist became an atheist. That's how it happened, y'all. The atheists started getting into the sciences and things like that, and all of a sudden you had the rationalism movement. Technology is giving people a little bit more understanding of why certain things are the way that they are. The ghostly myths about certain things of why we thought things the way they were started to go away. All of a sudden now, people start getting a little bit more understanding. They start like re-questioning the Bible a little bit. People start, getting real reactionary, doctrinal. From that, people's like, you know what? No, we're missing something. God ain't all doctrine. We need spirit. Here comes the first great awakening, revival. First great awakening was burned over. Check out Massachusetts. They wanted something more. They wanted the kingdom to come. So the second great awakening happened. We want Christ to come back, y'all. We want him to come back. We're so excited for him. Now we want him to come back. When is he going to come back, man? I don't know. Maybe we could guess or something. Come, Lord Jesus. People was getting excited. At the same time, it's like you can't blame these people. You know what I mean? Miller read the Bible for 16 years. Straight. Yeah, it's amazing you read about these people, but I ain't gonna look at them all and just, oh, they're heretics. Like, no, like, how you think, history is gonna look at us? Man, what the heck was they thinking? Yeah, man, it's 1:37 in the morning, and I'm getting a little too excited. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. If nobody else got any like questions or anything, um, I just hope that this is giving you a clear picture of movements and the doctrines that push those movements, or the movements that came from those doctrines. Either way, they fed off each other. So in 2 weeks, on March 21st, we're going to continue part two. What is part two going to be about? Part two is going to be about covenants. Going to talk about covenants. Now that we got an introduction to how all this started, now we'll look at the doctrines. Now that we got the history in check. All right, y'all. Let me go ahead and wrap this up. So, for those of y'all who hung in all the way to the end, I want to thank y'all. Um, you guys have a good night, and peace and blessings. Please, share. Please subscribe. I'm thinking maybe someday soon I'm gonna get a Patreon account, because it takes so long to put this stuff together. I mean, a lot of times I'm up to like 4 in the morning putting some of this stuff together. Not anymore, but I remember I used to be. But it takes a lot to put this stuff together. So please, subscribe, share, email me at ssoreal@gmail.com. Call me at 412-872-8037. If you're a pastor, if you're listening to this, I would love to come and speak to your young people. Allow me to spend a few days with them, just to build with them, to build with you. I don't mind speaking to a group of pastors. Perhaps we could kind of come together and have some ideas. I will share with you all that I have. My PowerPoints. Heck, I'll even train you with what I know. I'll share eSword with you. I'll share my personal eSword with you. So that way you won't have to painstakingly download everything. I'll just give you the 2 GB eSword. So you as a pastor can be equipped. Whoever you are. I'll travel states. It doesn't matter. The church needs to be upgraded because people are leaving. Now, hey, you know what? If God calls you out of the church, then hey, that's between you and the Lord, and that is, the Lord's will for your life on whatever that is. You know what I mean? I'm always in prayer about my life. And we should all be in prayer about all of our lives, right? All right, everybody. Peace and blessings.